Okay.
We're live, everyone.
Remember? Old commercial. Lying my age.
Not that old. I'm still young yet. Look at you using the front door today.
Too cold to ride your bike, Patrick?
Tires don't work anymore, right? Air comes out.
I wondered if maybe it was electric and so, it doesn't really do well in the cold.
No.
Were you accosted in the hallway about because John won't go back, John won't leave the library now because he don't want him to cancel school.
Oh, I actually had a teacher ask. Is that a little class and they're like, you can have school? Wow, the only place I've seen kids in school have dog walkers. Right. Guess what we don't have? We have more buses than we know what to do with, so.
So, school it
We don't
is.
have that one. And then I started, I think that is my question.
Yay, Lisa, thank you for bringing all our necessary items.
You're the best,
You
Lisa.
brought me my HDMI cord.
Huh? You're welcome. No, it's not. I'm gonna stick you on the end somewhere. That's a better corner, I think.
Molly did say she was coming home.
I'm so nervous tomorrow because I know it's gonna be cold in the office. How many meetings did you say last week we have left? Huh? 9? Oh. Right now, July 1st.
Yeah, I don't have to because we're just doing much help, so just live stream.
I know. As long as I don't get locked up. We just need to make sure that we can get back out of this room over here.
Just don't tell them we can't school tomorrow.
Hi. You did? Are you sure? I had was ready to put that in the door to be paid. Thank you. You're the best.
I gave you a whole thing.
Job, actually, data correction, 75%.
Yes,
Is that,
in 4 or 5 years. I mean, it might ultimately, but it's within that time frame.
how does that compare? So doing that, looking at it, I said, okay, those are
It's typical, I mean, one of those has the statewide average, so you can see,
I saw the statewide average, I was just dumbfounded that that's what's actually occurring. Has it been a steady decline over time, or has it always been around 75%?
so I remember my mom talking to me about her freshman orientation, and they said, take a look at the person on your left and the person on your right. You know, one of them will be gone by the time you finish. So I think that's been a pretty standard statistic.
Pretty steady.
Yep. Especially when you think about the amount of resources that go into higher ed.
Good.
That and I remember my freshman year, the most was like 1 out of 4. That's the answer. That was the other one that I took away. What time was that at? Sure. It's just one different.
Okay.
Sorry. Sure, what time is that at? What time? Time?
6 o'clock. Did you say 6 o'clock?
It's
so long.
Thought it was 5. That's what they were told me, but I wasn't.
Yeah, I think it was 5 o'clock.
Does that work?
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order and welcome you to the Hampton-Wilbraham Regional School District School Committee meeting. It is 6:30 p.m. I see that David Sanders from Wilbraham Public Access Channel is recording. Is there anyone else here recording this meeting? We will do roll call in alphabetical order. Bill Bonzenti? Cheryl Caruana?
Here.
Sean Kennedy?
Here.
Patrick Kiernan?
Present.
Lisa Marie?
Here.
Maura Ryan?
Here.
Michelle Boudreau? Aye. Here. Please stand for the pledge of allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We do have a need for executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of a public body, and the chair so declares. Lauren Bryan.
Make a motion to go to executive session.
Second.
So I thought of this afterwards. I don't think we can because it's not listed, it's not on the post. So even though we said it, somebody doesn't have the ability to know within the 48 hours who the body is, or who the individual is that we're
So you're saying it's listed here, but it's not listed in the
So
posting?
you have to, no,
So
in
it's
the
listed
posting, you
as-
have to list either the person's name, if it's an individual, or the
Organization.
the negotiation unit A, unit B,
Right.
C, unit D.
Yeah,
So
okay.
it's not there, so if it's not listing, I would just encourage us to push to the next one. If that's okay with them.
So because the motion's on the table, do we say all those in favor and they just vote it down?
We can just, I make a motion to table the motion.
Okay. Second?
We vote on tabling it and then we don't have to.
But I don't know that that's tabling the same thing now, because the idea is you can't, it's,
If you table it, it becomes dead at the end of the meeting unless we say we're tabling it until the next meeting.
So we can vote.
okay.
Yep.
All in favor?
Aye.
Roll call.
Roll call. Cheryl?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
Lisa?
Aye.
Patrick? Lisa? Aye. Laura?
Aye.
Myself, aye. Okay, so we will continue on with the student representative report. Molly?
There we go. Hello. So Student Council is having a Stress for a Cause Day for the ALS Association tomorrow. So they'll be taking donations at the door, and they're very persistent about it. The chorus and band programs will be having their honors recital next Wednesday, the 8th, from starting at 7 p.m. And the swim and dive team is league champions, and so is the wrestling team. So congrats to them. Tuesday the 7th, there's another mini jog for the 3rd graders. And semester 2 open house is happening next Thursday. And that's all that I have.
There's also, I think, dine out tonight at Mandarin.
Oh, was that, I thought it was like canceled. They might have posted someone, but I believe it was canceled, so.
Will I take that back?
Yeah.
Cut that up.
Any questions for Molly? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Molly.
Have a great week. Stay warm tomorrow. Where you ready to go?
All right, so we will continue with the Assistant Superintendent of Finance and Operations and Human Resources, Aaron.
Alrighty, so you have a few memos in your file. The first relates to the second floor railing. This has been an ongoing safety concern for the school and the district. We have a proposal, sorry about that. We have a proposal to put this work out to bid. And we expect the total cost all in to be less than $120,000. We're suggesting that we consider taking that from the Minnetonka Capital Stabilization Account. We do think it's going to be significantly less than $120,000, but looking at where bids have gone recently, we're just apprehensive about where things might come in at. If somehow we get a bid above that, we bring it back to have you look at it. And this cost includes engineering fees and things like that.
How much money's in the stabilization fund now?
Say again?
How much money's in the fund now?
It's somewhere in the neighborhood of $300 and some thousand, $225.
So when, I think it was December, this was raised, there was potential to inquire with the town about ARPA. Since this would clearly fit under a use for ARPA, has that conversation happened with either town?
So we've done the switches. We're funding the $300,000 of switches from the town's ARPA funds. We haven't, this has been on our capital plan as something to do, so we didn't necessarily think to take it for ARPA funds. Last I talked to the town, they have dried up their ARPA funds, I believe.
Both towns still have ARPA funds available.
Both towns.
still have ARPA.
I can.
But during, I apologize, during one of our finance and operations subcommittee meetings, it was noted by one of the members from Wilbraham that was attending that they didn't necessarily have, that funds were earmarked for other things.
They may have been earmarked, but the funds still exist. They haven't been,
Correct, because I know that Hamden still has funds available.
I think Hamden has like 600,000, and I think Wilbraham has somewhere in the ballpark of 400,000. So my recommendation on this would be to reach out to the towns. This would be a clear, and a great use of ARPA, and potentially look at it and see if we can split it between the towns and the district versus going all in from a stabilization fund. I think we could argue whether that's what this is really truly intended intended for when the stabilization fund was created, and if we need it down by a third, that's pretty rich for an account, and frankly.
I'm happy to take it back to the towns and make that request if that's the will of the school committee.
And we should put on the agenda in the future to talk about the stabilization fund and exactly what it means and what we should use it for. I think we should just get some clarity on that, because I think all of us would have a different opinion on around the table.
I think it's come up 3 different times.
Yeah.
We put parameters around what the stabilization fund means.
And it even came up during one of the budget roundtables a couple years ago. So you're right, John.
So
Does that suggestion work?
is that the decision of the committee?
Yes. Does anyone?
Just trying to,
Yeah, if you could go back to the towns, I think that's and just, did you go to them and they said we don't have any, or did you just hear
no,
that?
in meetings we've had, they have indicated that Wilbraham has indicated that their funding has been earmarked already, so that would not be an available source.
Instead of just assuming that we'll take it back, can we call it a majority vote that we will have Aaron do that? So that it's noted somewhere that we as a full committee decided to do that?
I don't think it needs a vote. I think we can just say as a committee, we're
No, I don't think, I know, but I think it's better to just do an all those in favor situation, not a roll call or anything.
Motion to have Aaron approach both communities to discuss using ARPA funds to support this, with the district potentially kicking in a portion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. The next item on the list relates to our METCO grant. As I've shared, our numbers have dwindled rapidly in our METCO program. Next year, if we do not recommit to METCO, we will have no students and therefore no funding. So that is $130,000 that would typically go to offset our budget. At this time, with no other source for those funds, it's our recommendation that the school committee vote to recommit to the state METCO program on a going forward basis.
So it's $130,000, and then we also receive $8,314 per student.
So yes, we're in an interesting situation. We're in a hold harmless situation with METCO. So that grant has I don't think it's a law, it's just a provision that they try to make sure that there isn't an interruption in funding. If you're committing to this program and you have a drop-off in students for a year or a couple years because you just couldn't enroll enough, you didn't have enough room, they don't want you to lose funding. So we're not really living within the spirit of it. The spirit of it is that you would continue it at times when you could, but we fell through the cracks to keep it simple. So we were at one point at that $130,000 level, and we're not going to go below it as long as we continue to commit to the program. If we were to take in additional students and we were to, I think, end up with, that would come to, let's call it 15-ish students. If we were to exceed that funding level, our METCO grant would go up above $130,000. But for now, in speaking with the program director, as long as we make a conscious effort to continue the program, they would honor our funding level in their minds.
Do we have the infrastructure in place? So I know at Winchell High School that had METCO, and there was a METCO coordinator who was part of the public schools. Does that exist here? Do we have the right personnel in place to support METCO?
There's not been anyone in place to this point. I mean, I kind of fell into this when I started looking at our grants.
It was Pete Dufresne at one point, because he was at the meeting and that's what he told us.
Right.
When he was at the middle school.
I mean, I think some districts do have a METCO coordinator. We've been using it to offset some instructional costs and some transportation costs. So the part of the METCO grant is that we provide transportation to those students.
So that would just be my question. Do we have a plan to truly implement and support METCO students? And if so, great, but I think that's really important to have if we're going to continue.
All I can say is we have the same plan as we had 2.5 years ago when I got here. I think we have to, there's a convening meeting on March 8th, which is where we will have to have determined that we are going to recommit to the program. At that point, I can have conversations with them about what the requirements are and whether we can, what we need to do. I don't believe we're required to have like an entirely separate full-time position as a coordinator. There just isn't the funding for that. So to some degree, we'll do what we do and we'll coordinate the grant to the best of our ability as we're doing now.
Is there an
Other grants.
LPVEC METCO coordinator? Is there an LPVEC METCO coordinator?
Not to my knowledge, no. Not all of the LPVEC schools are in METCO, and there's none that I'm aware of at LPVEC. Yeah.
John, what are your thoughts on this?
As we're looking at trying to close budget gaps, I think every $130,000 counts. I think that to the question of infrastructure, as we learned at the budget meeting the other day, this was sort of a part of Pete's position. I think likely it would be a duty that is assigned to another administrator as an additional duty within the district. I also think that there are benefits to all of the students of having a more diverse student body, and so I think for all those reasons, I would be in favor of continuing the program.
So would you need a motion?
Well, it's not listed as a vote on this agenda, so I think tonight was just to get a sense of the committee, but, we can put it on the agenda for a vote.
Is it possible then, if that's the case, then you can come back to us as the committee, just kind of give us an idea of how you plan to create an infrastructure, or have an idea of how you want to facilitate the program, just to make sure that we're not setting you guys up to fail if we say, yes, go for this?
Sure, absolutely.
I just think it's fair for you guys to understand what you're getting yourself into and what that may look like.
The next item on my agenda is item C, MRHS lighting. I'm not going to read the entire memo, but this is a bit of a summary of what has happened, a little bit of a cost summary as we're sharing based on a lot of the changes that have occurred to our systems at the high school over the past couple of years. We think the best sort of way of doing this would be to do more of a post-analysis. So the March 2022 to March 2023 analysis would probably be the best way to look at this. Some of the items that have changed since in the past couple of years during COVID include the addition of 1,000 Chromebooks in this building. So, they're charging every night, so they're being used every day and every night. We've increased the air circulation. We've increased the grade of the filters that air is being pushed through. All of that taps our electrical system. Additionally, over those years, as I see it, the last sort of best time to look at it when we were sort of in full session would be 2019. There's been significant inflation in energy prices in general in that time, so it's hard to really evaluate this. We also have solar credits, so our solar credits actually track with our total usage. So the more we use, actually, the more solar credits we receive. So that offsetting solar credit amount is an impact as well. So when you combine all of those things, it's very hard to get a really good track on what the additional cost of the electric is.
The kilowatt hours, for the solar credits don't subtract from the kilowatt hours, it subtracts at the end, right?
No, but many of those items that I shared added to the kilowatt hours.
Right.
So the, running the air circulation through higher grade filters and more frequently is impactful in electricity use, as are the Chromebooks, as are air purifiers that are sitting in many classrooms now.
So when this is done, we can just do comparison and we should have an accurate,
Sure.
okay?
Are you able to calculate the kilowatt hour for the
Mhm.
light itself? So each light based off of the structure of the building has a kilowatt hour for the light. So we should be able to tell, based off of the structure of the lights that are actually still on 24 hours a day, to figure out what that cost is, and then subtract it from what that March number is.
So-
I just don't know what the light
So to
is.
pull the
Calculate.
kilowatt hours from the lights?
So you
specifically,
calculate the kilowatt, yes, because it's per the hour. I mean, it's per the type of
is-
wattage on the light.
If there's someone who can help us figure that out,
I'll be more than happy to send you the calculation, because I was just told how to calculate it the other day.
Hmm?
I'll be more than happy to send you the formula to calculate
Okay.
it. I just don't know, based off of the schematic of the lights that are part of that system,
Right,
that it should be like on the light, on that plan.
okay. Sure. We'll see what we can do. That's not my area of expertise.
No, and I understand that, so I'm not putting you on the spot for that. I just want to help you get that number.
Okay, okay. Send me the formula.
I haven't read this thoroughly yet, but I'm looking at at this time, the vendor no longer supports the installed core product or software. And they offer no software that is backwards compatible with the underlying system.
Mhm.
Are we going to be able to really get this fixed?
Meaning, so, sorry, let me get to this section. Yeah. So, I mean, one of the problems with any proprietary system is, I mean, they control the revisions of the software. I don't think we can promise that their next generation would be fully backwards compatible. It's just like any computer. I mean, at some point, I know Apple for many years was very backward compatible, and they ended that at some point. So anytime you bought a new computer, it wouldn't be backward compatible, or your software wouldn't be backward compatible with your Mac 2C from, you know, the 1980s. I don't necessarily know that this would be eternally backward compatible, and there would be a need to, you know, make a change to things like the server and things like that should something change.
However, one of the things I'd add to that is we've been assured that there will be some kind of a manual override. So if we get into this situation again, we can send someone down to a server somewhere to flip a switch to turn off the lights.
Any other questions? Thank you for looking into this.
Hmm?
Thank you for keeping up on this.
Sure. Okay. And you have a monthly budget report. The same items that we've been talking about a lot continue to plague us. Substitutes continue to run up a lot for us. I think I shared with you that we are running the past couple of years, last year and this year, we're running at least 50% over our sort of pre-COVID numbers on total substitute days. So I think I shared we were at around 3,100 days on average pre-COVID. In 2022, we were over 5,500. I haven't calculated since early January, but we were at 2,800 in early January. So, you know, expect substitutes to continue to be a point of pain. Out of district special education costs are exactly where they've been. You know, everything in there is going up as opposed to going down, if anything, at this point. So we're trying to stay as steady as we can with that. You will see at the bottom, I have a running tally of the available funds we have in school choice as well as ESSER that we will put forward towards our budget, showing that we do still have a pretty strong net budget available of $1.3 million. Looking at this, we have, looking at last month to this month and looking at some history, you know, holding steady, we have about a $250,000 a month burn rate of available funds. So things we spend on things that aren't already encumbered, right? So supplies, additional things like that. You know, we are kind of, we've spoken with department heads and principals, and not necessarily said, hey, let's freeze spending, but let's be careful about what we spend. I guess the word John used was chill spending, to the best of our ability as we kind of think through this, knowing particularly that next year is going to be very challenging. Any questions? All righty.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We move on to our next agenda item, which is the role of subcommittees. So in your binder, you'll see our policy for subcommittees of the school committee. And it's just, I think it's an important conversation to have now with the subcommittees that we have. So just a reminder, beyond our policy, so that is, those are the rules that we should be abiding by. And just a reminder that the full board refers to the subcommittees. So the subcommittees cannot give directives to the superintendent or administration. So any directives should really be coming from the full school committee. And another thing is minutes for subcommittee meetings, they should be completed and sent to the full board for approval. And they're the only, the full board is the only body that has the authority to act on those items.
I know we've been having the subcommittees do their own minutes, because I haven't seen any subcommittee meeting minutes, sorry. I haven't seen any since I've been here for 7 years. I don't know. Bill's been here longer, he's not here right now, but I've never seen subcommittee meeting minutes.
So it's part of the open meeting law. So it really has to, the open meeting law requires that your subcommittee can approve their own minutes, but really that's secondary, but they should really be done to the whole committee. So you really have, it should be done within 3 meetings or 30 days, which, 10.
Is this a change of policy, or is this something that?
No, it's open meeting law, it's Mass General law. So a timely manner is.
Have we had that run by an attorney or something, just to make sure that we're all?
It's Mass General law.
So we're all expected to actually take the open meeting law training every 2 years, so it's actually part of that.
So just because we haven't been doing it, it doesn't mean that it's not been a requirement.
No,
or
I'm just saying, I
hasn't been
just want to
allowed.
make sure that it is a requirement, because it's been a long time and we haven't done it, so.
Exactly, so in reviewing some of what we're doing versus the should be doing, but doing,
Sure.
we're uncovering that there's a lot of things that haven't been happening that should be happening. And that's that one's regulated by the state, that's not school committee, that's not MASC. The MASC directs you back to the open meeting law itself.
But how would the full committee approve minutes for when they weren't necessarily at those minutes?
It's not a matter of being at the meeting, it's making it part of the record.
Right.
So because that subcommittee is doing work on behalf of the full committee, it's just voting them into record.
Oh, okay.
Similar to when we have a committee meeting,
Mhm.
you could maybe miss the meeting, the last meeting, but you can participate and vote because it's just making it part of the record. Abstaining from it doesn't necessarily do anything other than just saying that you don't vote on it at all.
Mhm.
It's just saying when you say aye, to say you agree, you're just saying you're agreeing to make it part of the record.
Okay. I thought you said that they had to vote on the minutes.
Well, they vote to make it record, so when to the vote is to vote it to record.
But then it also brings forth the information that occurred at that meeting, and then the full committee can direct the subcommittee to look further, at whatever issues were brought up. So just for context, the open meeting law requires public bodies to create and approve minutes in a timely manner. A timely manner is considered to be within the next 3 public body meetings or 30 days from the date of the meeting, whichever is later unless a public body can show good cause for the delay. The Attorney General encourages minutes to be approved at the public body's next meeting whenever possible.
Encourages, it says?
Yes.
Can you read that last line? So it
The Attorney General
Yeah?
encourages minutes to be approved at a public body's next meeting whenever possible. But the timely manner that was referenced right before that was
Yeah.
saying that you have either 30 days
Mhm.
or within the next 3 public body meetings, whichever is later. Okay, but they're saying try to do things
Yeah,
as
yeah.
quickly as possible. And then the law requires that existing minutes be made available to the public within 10 days of a request, whether they have been approved or remain in draft form. Materials or other exhibits used by the public body in an open meeting must also be made available to the public within 10 days of the request. So back to some of the other, so the meeting minutes. So yeah, so just the subcommittees have no power except to deliberate on items that have been put forth from the full committee. And then no decisions are made until the full board says so.
Number 2.
That's the only other one that, I don't think we've ever followed that.
Yes, that's what I was gonna say, so either we should, if the full committee agrees, send BDE back to the policy subcommittee to memorialize how we've operated from a 2 standpoint, or we should
Follow what the
Yeah.
policy is.
either one.
Yeah, I think in practice, we've been doing something different, and I think rather than going back to a policy that we haven't followed, I don't know, Bill, did they follow it before I came on board?
It's been that way since I got here.
I would
Yeah.
just send it back to policy sub
Yeah,
to look at number 2.
to edit it to how we do it now.
Well, I mean, is that what we want to be doing?
Yeah, because that's how we've been,
Well,
that's
that's a
Well, no, but-
discussion we're gonna have.
But I think doing it one way versus, because we've done it that way, is that the proper way that we should do it? Or should we as a committee, if we're going to vote to have a chair to our full committee, allow them to appoint who the chair of the subcommittee is?
yeah,
Because it
I
actually
think
eliminates-
that's too much
Excuse me.
power. And
It allows for the committee to go into a meeting with a chair ready to go versus a meeting where you have to set an organization. Most school committees operate where the chair of the subcommittee is appointed at the organization meeting, where you vote for your new school committee chair, the officers, and then it's done at that point.
I like how we do it now. I think that we, as a group, have all decided, yeah, okay, you can do this, or whatever, we've all come to an agreement in all the years that I've been on the committee. There's never been an issue with that. So I would say let's keep doing it the way we're doing it, where the whole committee's involved rather than the chairperson dictate.
I don't necessarily know that the chair dictates versus the full committee can make recommendations for the chair to make the appointment. I don't
It
think,
says
I don't
here,
think
the
it would be,
chairperson will appoint the subcommittee chairperson and its members.
but I'm sure that would be done with a discussion. I mean, again, this was, the reference to the policy was created as guidance, so we can create it and make it what we want it to be as a full committee. So if the will of the full committee is to bring it back to come up with either using it the way it was, the way we've done it, or following it the way that it was suggested by the MASC when the policy was adopted. Unfortunately, I don't know when it was adopted because we don't put those notes on the bottom of the policy, so we know when it was accepted into our policy manual.
So 2 things, it also does state subject to approval by the committee. So I think that also makes it sort of a case by case. But if we want, as a committee, say that we want it to go back to the policy committee, we can certainly do that.
Yeah, I would make a motion to send the BDE subcommittees on the school committee, I guess we're going to call it subsection 2, back to the policy subcommittee to have it reflect more how we've been doing things, rather than how it's written down.
Second.
Any additional discussion?
I think it's one of the best meetings we have, is when we all sit there and everyone gets their say, everyone jumps on different committees, whatever. It's something that has always worked. I've always been proud of that.
But I think that's what's in the writing of that, where it's subject to the approval by the committee.
Yeah, I think, I don't see the difference. I don't see why we can't have a robust discussion and still have it subject to the approval of the committee.
It's no different than if we had a conversation and said, okay, Bill, Sean, and Mara are going to be on finance. Which one of you would like to be the chair? Bill can say he'd like to be the chair, if nobody else wants to be the chair, and everybody agrees with that, then the school committee chair will appoint him as the chair. So there's no need for an organization meeting, we just start that meeting.
What if we get someone who's just like, let's just say one party over another party, and decides to make all the chairs of all the, just one partisan person that happens to be chair? I'm just saying.
But it
how we've
doesn't
been
work,
doing
but it
it.
doesn't work like that.
can't based off the subject to approval by the committee.
It's worded in such a way so it cannot be done
So
that
if you
way.
look at the top, the school committee shall appoint.
So
members.
we have been doing it this way, is that what we're saying?
No, we're not following our own policy.
No, the only, I mean, it's somewhat nuanced, but the difference is it gets voted on. So I think to Maura's point, if you do it during the reorganization meeting, subject to approval by the committee, the full committee has it so that you roll right into your committee meeting, subcommittee meeting set up with your chair and so forth versus having the first meeting be a reorganization meeting in every subcommittee effectively.
So the only difference is that at that meeting, we would say, all right, who's going to be chair and
Yep.
decide if there's a full committee?
Yep, so if you want to nominate yourself to be the chair of something, we could all say yes unless someone wanted to, unless someone else wanted to do it, and then maybe you could explain why, and then the committee could then say, okay, well, we'll make a decision as a committee to say who would be the best person for that role. I mean, I don't think it's going to honestly be an issue, it's just making sure that we comply with our policy.
I'm a fan of changing rules to reflect how societies run rather than changing society based on how the rules are written. So I would say, let's just go and make it how we've been doing it. If anyone did anyone have a problem with how we've been doing it? Is this?
It just makes
For
it
anyone
easier to be
or-
able to know how you get a meeting going and started, because when you go into your first meeting, it's okay, so who creates that agenda for that first meeting? Because you don't have someone appointed as a chair, so you're not following how that works. That puts
But
more
John
onus
did-
on John, but he, at the subcommittee level, shouldn't necessarily have to do that.
Well, if the policy reflects what it is that we want to achieve, reorganization would be no different from the reorganization of the full government, where you just write the agenda, and the first item on the agenda is election of officers. But one thing that I see is that if you go from here, then you're basically, the first decision that the subcommittee has, which is to elect its leadership, you're basically taking that responsibility away from the subcommittee. So basically, you're taking the autonomy of the subcommittee.
Oh, can you use your microphone?
Yeah, turn your
Sorry.
microphone on.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
I'll repeat that. So the way that I see it is that if you, the reorganization at the full committee level is done very simply. And that is that the superintendent basically takes control of the meeting and gathers in, and basically all you do is you just say, okay, fine, first order of business is we, elect officers. It doesn't take a long time to do it. But like I said, what you're doing is you're taking the subcommittee and you're basically taking the power away from the subcommittee, because you have a group of 3 members who will be working together, and then you have 4 other members of the committee that may influence who that person is that's going to be leading the committee. But in the minds of the committee members, that may not be the person who they think is the best person to lead the committee. So I think that it's a slippery slope, because what you're doing is you're basically taking the first authority of the subcommittee and you're basically taking it away. So
But it's not an authority to the subcommittee. The subcommittee is just a working group
the authority of the subcommittee.
from the full committee.
The authority of the subcommittee comes in the ability to elect a chair, to elect officers to the subcommittee, correct? That's how we do it on the full committee level, so why
But
would?
that's a full committee, but a subcommittee is just meant to take a task from the full committee so that more time can be dedicated to the business side of what we do, so that
I
someone
understand, yeah.
focuses on that one aspect.
I
It's not
under-
meant to have authority. There's no authority at the subcommittee level.
No, I-
Everything gets done through the full committee.
No, I understand, but what you're doing is then you're taking 4 members who are not involved in the subcommittee and basically putting them in the position of dictating who's going to lead the subcommittee, who at the subcommittee level, the members of the subcommittee may not agree. You understand what I'm saying?
I hear what you're saying, but I'm just saying, I think it's the will of the full committee as to who they want to be. I think you're assuming something that may not happen. I think it could have easily have been appointed similar to how our subcommittees are set up now at our organization meeting, where we just say which committee we want to be on, and then if someone would like to be the chair, then all Michelle is doing is making it to record that Bill Bontempi has been appointed the chair of the Finance and Operations and Technology Subcommittee. I don't think it's going to be what you think it is. I just think it allows for more fluid business flow per our own policy.
I think if you look at number 2, it sort of states it right out. The committee chairperson is subject to approval by the committee. So
I
it's
understand.
not- Excuse me, it's not going back to the committee and it's been already predetermined. It's subject to the approval of the committee. Everyone, subject to our approval.
I understand what the policy says. What I'm saying is that if you, let's say policy, right? You have 3 members that are appointed to policy. 4 members of the committee who are not involved in policy will look at that and say, okay, well, we're going to elect this person as the chair because you're going to take the recommendations of the full committee. Okay? So the 4 members of the committee who are not on the subcommittee now have a strong influence on the leadership of said committee. And when you get at the subcommittee level, the 3 members of the subcommittee may not agree that that person is the best person to be at the helm of that subcommittee. So what you're doing is you're diluting what the subcommittee can do simply by saying, okay, you guys don't have the ability to elect who you think is going to be the most effective person to run the subcommittee. We're going to appoint that person for you. And so the ability of the subcommittee to work as efficiently as it needs to is being undermined by the ability of them to elect who they pick. I mean, if I'm on a sports team, all right, I want to elect who's captain on the sports team.
But don't most coaches appoint a captain?
No.
There are some teams where that's,
No.
I'm just saying and sometimes it goes based on seniority too.
I think another way to look at this entire thing is that we nominate people to be chair of whether it's a subcommittee or school committee. So if I nominate somebody and they're not interested or they don't feel that they're well suited or capable or have the time, then they will decline the nomination. So I think there's also that piece, and it's not just somebody arbitrarily saying, okay, Bill, I want you to be the chair, and that's who's going to be.
I'd just like to,
Not that we need to use you as an example.
just to understand this better. So we've been doing it a certain way, and it's been working for a certain way for at least 8 years that we know of with the experienced members on this committee. Can you tell us why you think this is better?
Well, first of all, that just tells us that for 8 years, we've had a policy that we don't follow. So there are likely a lot more policies that we have in our policy manual that we're not following. And so it's our diligence to make sure that we're following our own policy.
Well, we're supposed to have a student representative sitting with us with voting rights and stuff like that to participate in these meetings, and we have some, and sometimes, you know, we encourage them to stay, but they usually come and just tell us to leave. They're supposed to be elected,
Yep.
and I bring it up every year, and it's just
We
something
can't
that no one
force-
wants to.
We can't
to do it.
force a person.
Huh?
We can't force a person to do that role, and it's actually the student committee. There's 5 students that get elected to those roles, and it's usually one of those members. We can't force that any one of those students to come and be a part of our meeting.
No, but we don't
they
have
want to-
elections.
We don't have the election. The election is supposed to be within the school.
Right, but
we
I'm saying
can't-
it doesn't get done. It's a
It doesn't.
policy that gets ignored.
It
Huh?
happens.
Can I,
Actually, it does not.
can I ask?
There's a school committee election, I'm sorry, just Steve was nodding.
Through student government, they elect the
Comes out of student
representatives
council.
to sit on the committee.
Yeah, that's not what the policy is. The policy is that it's supposed to be school-wide.
It's the student advisory committee. There's a title for it.
Patrick.
Can we send this to the policy subcommittee, please? Because I think if you look at the placement of commas in 2, you could actually look at it wildly different than what we've referenced thus far. So I would encourage us to send it back to the policy for number 2 in particular, to look at the language and ensure that it's clear. Come back to the full committee with language for 2.
So the other part of this policy that needs to be reviewed then is also number 3, because we as the full committee should be tasking the subcommittees with the things that they're supposed to be working on, or topics, things like that, like similar to like the light situation that we have now. That could have been something that instead of necessarily just keeping it on Aaron, we could have tasked with the subcommittee, the finance and operations subcommittee, to potentially assist Aaron with it. Using it as an example, I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen, but there's different aspects that come up to our meeting that should be done that way versus there are
So 2
agendas being put together that shouldn't have topics on them.
I think the whole thing should go back to the.
I'm just trying to understand, so as a policy subcommittee, we understand where the potential concerns are. So I've heard 2 and 3. Any other concerns throughout it?
Well, yeah, I just don't think it matches how we've been doing it. So if they've had a policy and they created this policy and then, as far as we know, over 8 years, never enforced this policy or did the policy, should, you know, is this where, like, you go where the path is and that's where you put the concrete, or you just put the roads where you want to put and make people,
Well, it's not putting the
Try to
road
comply.
where you want it to go. This has been the policy in the policy manual.
but it's not been followed, it's been done differently. So
I
you're saying,
understand, but I
let's
guess I
change
don't
the
understand
policy.
how, when it started to divert from what the policy was.
But I'm asking you, why is this, how is this better? And I've asked that, and I'll ask it a second time. How is what is here better than how we're doing it now?
Well, the conversation is about subcommittees and their role and what their duties and responsibilities are. So as a school committee and our subcommittees, we have not been following, and the subcommittees have not been operating the way that they are set up to do so. So remember that the subcommittees have no power independently. It's the full school committee. So the directive is given from the school committee, and the school committee is the body that votes on, things that we decide to move forward on.
Has there been an instance where a subcommittee has decided policy or something like that?
No, we're just making sure that everybody understands the role of subcommittees.
But I think you just said a minute ago that there's been instances where the subcommittees were not run properly.
Yeah.
Can
They
you
weren't run properly.
Can you expand on that?
I could, well, we were discussing meeting minutes earlier, so meeting minutes should be coming through the full committee. And I can say that since I've been on school committee, and I believe Sean also alluded to the fact that since he's been on school committee, he has not seen any subcommittee minutes come through the full school committee for approval.
No,
It's supposed to for.
Just
but
the
we did not.
5-year plan minutes, meeting minutes.
that's easy enough.
So, but,
That's just
right, but, it's supposed to be done within a certain amount of time, but it hasn't been happening. So that's just an example of something that has not occurred that should be occurring. There have been other conversations that have happened at the subcommittee level that has not made it up to the full committee level. So it's just important to make sure that we are.
more conversations.
So I'm be more than happy to speak on this because I'm the one that brought it up as a concern to the chair. The fact that the Finance Operations Subcommittee had a conversation about school choice and then actions were taken by the district that shouldn't have been taken by the district from the direction of the subcommittee when it wasn't the will of the full committee to take the actions. And because that information hasn't been presented to the general public is why I'm being, I don't want to say vague, but
Are you talking about the survey?
yes.
John, did I give you direct orders to create a survey?
It's not a matter of there being direct orders or direct requests. It's just making sure that
Or
it's
did the
clear.
committee discuss it and the administration felt that it was a reasonable survey to put out?
We had talked about, it was part of the conversation about doing a survey, but nothing was decided. It wasn't decided in the meeting that we will do a survey and we will instruct the superintendent to do so, because that's not something we would do in the meeting.
I understand, but it's when information from the survey was shared with only subcommittee members, when it should have been shared with members of the full committee. I'm just making sure that all of the items that are on the agenda for subcommittees are at the will of the full committee, because that's what is supposed to happen.
But the subcommittee did not direct the
I
superintendent.
didn't say that they
to
did.
do this. So I believe the superintendent did an excellent job of taking the initiative to try to gather information.
Did you know
The
that?
superintendent sits in the meeting, so certainly if there is a question that pops up, and in this case, it was regarding school choice, and more specifically, why school choice students choose to attend this school. I think it's a very important question. If the superintendent felt that it was important enough to create a survey for it, then I think rather than look negatively at the subcommittee, I would look positively at the subcommittee.
I'm not.
Wait a minute, that has been
Let me finish.
discussed at the full committee, hang on, that's been discussed at the full committee, and we have instructed the superintendent on many occasions to dive deep into why people are,
Yes, I'm not.
But I can finish my thought. So, rather than looking at that conversation, and looking at it as a negative, like I would look at it as a positive because, our CEO basically said, wow, that's a great question. You know what? I think that's good information. I think it's information we should have. So I don't see that as a negative. I see that as
But you're imposing an emotion on something that is not being said. There was nothing about what I said as it being a negative. I was simply providing you with an example. I'm not putting any negative onus on what the superintendent did or what happened in the meeting. It's merely in the meetings that I sit in, you make comments where you'll say, we should do this, we should do that, so that in turn becomes someone taking a directive, a direct action from a chair of a subcommittee. I'm not saying even saying that is wrong or negative or bad. I'm just saying I think it's important that it's very clear what the subcommittees are doing and working on so that the full committee knows and we're meeting the requirements of the open meeting law.
Motion to send policy BDE to subcommittee.
It's already been made and seconded.
It was, no, it was just
You-
to send
you-
to.
Send to.
So
Huh?
I'm saying, I'm amending it to say
All right.
motion to
Can
send
you
policy.
repeat that, because I didn't hear you?
Make an amendment to the motion to
Oh, wait a
send
minute,
the
I want to
whole.
hear his motion first, since we started to talk.
I'm amending Sean's motion to send policy BDE to the policy subcommittee.
So he's amending it to include all of the points rather than, I guess I said point 2.
Yes.
Okay. So all the points.
Is there a second?
I thought he was making a motion.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, sorry. Okay. Subcommittee.
Yeah.
So just regarding the subcommittee bill, but one of the important things for our subcommittees is just making sure that when you're reporting out, when you have a subcommittee meeting, making sure that items are reported out to the full committee as well.
Can you explain that? I don't quite understand. Just say it again.
When a subcommittee holds a meeting, making sure that discussions that occur at that subcommittee meeting gets reported out to the full committee.
Yeah.
Well, I think that would be the minutes. We would bring the minutes to the meeting. I think that basically qualifies.
Yes.
I mean,
But up until this point, we
It's
haven't been
section
doing
10,
that.
subcommittee updates. Isn't that where we're supposed to do it? If there's any meeting, we talk about what's been talked about?
I think the minutes will make.
It'll
everybody's-
clarify all
So
that.
Not a
sometimes,
problem.
I don't think everyone always goes, okay, we reviewed policy BDE, policy ABCDEFG, so forth, now you're covered.
But I would encourage us as members of the elected body to participate in the open meeting law training that's required of us every 2 years, or at least,
We have to.
I don't know that anybody knows who hasn't, who hasn't.
It's law, you're required to do it.
Okay.
We submit it to the.
Town clerk.
To the town clerk.
I think I'm doing next year.
So, yes, we want to be a high-performance school committee, so we should try our best to do better, perform better together.
No, I agree, the minutes will make all the difference.
Yeah.
I also think it's good to look at this stuff, even though we've been doing things for years, it's really good to look at what we're doing, how we're doing it, whether it's within the realm of what SS or MASC has suggested. I think it's a good thing to do.
If anybody would like to have a riveting conversation, join us on February 13th, where we can talk policy. BDE might be on the agenda.
So we will continue with, Amazon donation, or Aaron?
I'm going to recuse myself from this because I'm a employee of Amazon, and though I did suggest and help facilitate this to a certain point, I think I'm just going to step out of the room.
You have to step out of the room.
Okay.
So I guess the question on this is just whether the committee would authorize the district to enter into this agreement. This is essentially an agreement proffered by Amazon to address the donations we receive on a periodic basis and that are put in the pantry at TWB. So in your packet, you see it's a simple agreement with 7 provisions. We have in the past, or the committee has in the past, voted to accept the donations. At that time, this agreement wasn't known to the district, but we have been asked by Amazon if we would sign this as receivers of the gifts.
So looking at it, I would not sign this based off of 3, 5, 7, and the fact that the document is governed by Washington laws. Well, Washington laws are certainly friendly. They are not the friendliest state we would want to be in, so I would not sign this off. And in order to do it 3, 5, and 7, it has to go with Washington laws.
Do we know if we have the option of amending or redlining it to send it back to someone?
Tell you to fly.
I know, well, I'm just,
And then you amended your agreement.
but you have the right to redline any agreement to say that you don't agree to it.
Yeah, I would say that the committee has the right to propose any changes, it has the right to not sign, it has, I mean, it's certainly not compelled to sign this agreement just because it has accepted gifts in the past. We're not accompanied by this agreement.
Did we run this past council?
We did not.
Would there be any interest in at least having the attorney look at it and make proposed changes? I'm sure that if Patrick picked up 2 or 3 things on it, I'm sure the attorney would pick up 5 or 6 more. And do we feel that the expense involved in having the attorney look at it and make proposed changes would benefit the district if Amazon did agree to the changes to this contract?
So it's my understanding that the boxes come in not marked, not labeled. We don't necessarily know what's in the boxes until we see them.
That's correct.
Do we know what the cost has been to dispose of anything that cannot be used? And has that been an added cost? I mean, I realize we have a trash service, but if there's items that have to be thrown away, I know that becomes an added. And I know that we have I think we have a policy for surplus. There's more thrown away, but with that word, we get rid of it.
So, can I just ask, so what's so you just said the boxes coming from Amazon, they're not marked, they're not labeled.
So they come with stuff that may not be used by the district, so they end up having to throw it away. We don't actually know what it is, or if it's appropriate for students, for the school to have. Again, I'm not knocking them.
No, it just, I mean, if boxes come in, I mean, are they, the boxes don't have a label, they don't have a shipping label, they don't have anything. So we don't even know where these boxes are coming from.
So it was my understanding, one box came with like 25 tennis balls in it, which is great for phys ed. Another box came in with giant containers of Tabasco sauce, not saying that again, it couldn't be used, but it's just an idea. There was other things that couldn't be used at all in the school that I recall Al mentioning.
I'm not sure I'm not sure I would say we don't know where they're coming from. We know they're coming from the Amazon distribution center. What we don't know is what's in them. It's not like, for example, the district says, we could really use yoga mats. You know, can you save those for us and send us a box and we have them? We get whatever we get. Some of the stuff we can use and goes into the pantry. Some of the stuff we can use and gets distributed to schools. There is some amount of stuff that we can't use and gets thrown out.
And I think one of the problems that we last summer, I haven't been on top of it since then, was that there were so many boxes coming that it was filling classroom after classroom after classroom at B. And that takes people to just move it
Move,
and
sort.
organize and sort. And that takes a lot of staff
I'm all for
volunteering
donations.
to do this because it's not in their job description.
But I don't think that's what we're discussing here, right? We're simply discussing the agreement and whether you feel comfortable signing the agreement or authorizing this we sign the agreement or not.
Are we required to sign something?
Not required to sign anything. This was sent by Amazon with the request that we have someone sign it. We felt that it was important to bring it to the committee before just having a signatory.
Do we even have a policy regarding,
We do have a gifts to the district policy.
does it cover, usually gifts to the district are monetary donations? Or they could be like technology or instruments, things that you know what the district is getting before the donation is made.
They can be both monetary gifts or material gifts. The policy essentially says that gifts under a certain amount, the superintendent can receive. Gifts of higher value have to go before the school committee, which is why these gifts in the past had come before the school committee, because we were fairly certain that it exceeded the threshold.
I'm just looking at that, because there is a public gifts one. that policy, so I'm just looking at my phone to get the policy so I can share it with you.
So my recommendation, looking at this, because we're just talking about the donation agreement, is not to sign it if Amazon pushes and determine that there's enough value in what they're donating. Have a conversation with the attorney, but operate as we are until such time that Amazon refuses to ship it. Then make a call, that'll be my recommendation.
So our policy KCB reads, in accordance with state law, all grants and gifts to the district shall be reviewed and accepted by the school committee before expenditure or use. In the case of gifts from industry, business, or special interest groups, no extensive advertising or promotion may be involved in any donation to the school. Gifts will automatically become the property of the school district. Any gifts or cash, regardless of donor intent, will be accepted by the vote of the school committee, kept separate from the general fund, and expended at the discretion of the committee as provided by law. The committee directs the superintendent to assure that an appropriate expression of thanks is given to all donors. So just because you asked about the policy.
Okay, is everyone okay moving forward as we have been? And if Amazon pushes back, then we can send the agreement over to the attorneys to review, if that's.
Well, I would first ask if we think we're deriving enough value to send it to the attorney to Bill's point. And if what we're receiving, we don't think is something that we should pay a legal bill for, get guidance on them.
So, yeah, I've never done an analysis of the value of the gifts received versus the cost of the staff in order to stock the pantry. I think that's really what would be the way to figure that out. I can take a look at that and try to develop some suggestions or guidance of my own with respect to whether or not it makes sense to invest any legal fees and trying to figure out whether or not this is worth pursuing.
Okay, so you'll come back to this. Thank you. So we move on to you.
Okay.
So we are moving on to full business outcomes of each of the Hwrsd high school graduates.
Okay. So at the December Sewell Road meeting, if you recall, we were talking about the U.S. News and World Report ratings and what it was that we valued in education and how best to measure that. And I suggested that looking at actual performance of our students in college would be a more direct way of assessing their preparation for post-secondary education than looking at AP participation and scores, which are predicted at best. I said at the time that I knew I could get the data for our district, but I was unsure whether I could get comparable districts. Well, the good news is that I was able to get our comparables, and so I have some information to share tonight. So the next few slides follow the same format I used when presenting our accountability data. The boxes represent our peer districts, and I've shown the range of outcomes for the LVPC districts, although DESE does not identify any of the other LVPEC districts as peers for us, based on differences between our communities. So the first thing you can look at is how many of our students enroll or college university immediately following graduation. This is a percentage of our students who are sitting in a college classroom this September after graduating from high school. You'll see that just over 3/4 of the class of 21 were enrolled in higher ed the fall of their graduation year, which places us in close to the top of the range of other collaborative districts, but in the bottom half of the range for our peer districts. The data is from the class of 21, which is the most recent available. That was obviously a year that was impacted by COVID. The reason we're looking at that as opposed to 22, which would be our most recent graduates, is that information is not available yet. So some of our students' subgroups enrolled at higher rates relative to their peers in similar districts, most notably multiracial students, and some of our students enrolled at rates that were lower relative to their peer groups, most notably Hispanic or Latino students. But most of our student subgroups enrolled at ranges to put them almost directly in the middle of their receptive peer group ranges. So That's the first measure. How many students who graduate end up in a college the next fall? But enrolling in college is just the first step to obtaining a degree. To reach that goal, you need to stay enrolled, and many students drop out, especially a large number of students drop out before the start of their second year. And so this slide shows students who continued from the first year to the second, and this is the class of 20, not the same group we were looking for, because you have to go back a year to get the information about how many students persisted from year 1 to year 2. So here, I think our outcomes are decidedly better. More than 90% of our graduates who enrolled in college returned for a second year of college, which puts us above the median for our peer group and near the top of collaborative districts. Many of the student subgroups are well into the upper end of the range for their peer districts, including multiracial students who had a 100% first to second year persistence rate, which made us the exemplar among our peers. Our female students also came very close to best in group in terms of persistence. But the most direct measure of all, perhaps, is how many students actually obtain a degree. And that's what this slide shows. So we're looking at a different group of kids again, because you need students who are in college long enough to obtain a degree. So this is the class of 2017. Again, it's the most recent group that's been in college long enough to earn degrees that have been reported to the database. In these figures, students who did not enroll in college immediately after graduation in 2017 are excluded from the data set. So this shows the success rate just of the students who enrolled immediately upon graduation. And you can see that about 70% of our students obtained a degree in the first 4 or 5 years. And that puts us in the top half of the range for our peer districts, as well as for our collaborative districts. Our Black and Hispanic or Latino students had the highest degree completion rates among our peer districts. They are the exemplars for our group, which is why they're in orange. Although our Asian graduates and students with disabilities showed lower rates of degree completion for their respective subgroups. So another way to look at this is to follow the class of 2017 through their college career. You can see that here where they were at initial enrollment, persistence from the first to the second year in degree attainment, and throughout that entire pathway, our students were sort of in the middle range of our peer group. And also look at that same class with respect to the LVPEC districts. You see that our students had the second highest success rate at each step in the process as compared to the other LVPEC districts. So another thing you could look at is whether student participation in post-secondary education is increasing or decreasing over time, as measured by that first indicator, which is immediate post-graduation enrollment. And you'll see that we've been remarkably consistent, sending about 78 to 80% of graduating seniors onto higher ed, which has caused us to shift up slightly within our peer group, because some of the districts have seen changes of up to 10% in a negative direction.
John, question on that.
Sure.
This is 2 or 4 year.
That's correct. Any kind of post-secondary.
Do we have a breakdown between 2 versus 4?
I don't have all the data. I can give you some data on 2 versus 4, but not all of this. And so then you can also look at it with respect to our other collaborative districts. Again, you can see for most of this time frame, we're number 2. You can see, again, we're moving up within the group as other districts sort of have less participation in higher education, and our district remains relatively steady. And so I did want to just also touch on other outcomes, because higher education isn't the only goal students have immediately upon graduation. Some want to join the labor force or the military. In 2021, which is again the most recent year we have data for, About 10% of our seniors have aspirations along those lines. So here you can see how those different types of non-higher ed goals for our district compared to our peer districts. And the bar that I think about most in the stack is the orange, or the unknown component, because I think it's important for everyone to leave high school with some kind of a plan. Even though everyone has to improvise and adjust to what life throws at them, it helps to know what you're improvising from. That's why I think about the orange part of the stack and keeping that as small as possible. In 2021, that group that left with no real known plan was just 2% of our seniors, which is fairly small compared to our peer groups, as you can see. However, I'd love to get the percentage lower still, because some of our peer districts were able to get below 2%. So what I take away from all this is that while the percentage of our students enrolling in college immediately after graduation may be a few percent lower than it could be, our graduates tend to have more success remaining enrolled and completing programs, which causes them to wind up in a strong position if you measure success by our students' ability to complete what they set out to do. So that's what I can share about that. You're welcome.
Yeah, just dovetailing on Patrick's point, you can get us the data for the district report.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just want to say, excellent job. Excellent. It's incredibly helpful. Never seen data really presented this way. I've been on committee for 8 years, and it's rewarding to see that the work that we do is making a difference. So
Thank you.
I thank you for taking the initiative and doing this. I think it's really valuable information, not just for us, but for the community as well.
Thank you.
Second.
Can we make some of this data available,
Sure.
just so that, like, I don't know how, when we look at the new website someday?
Because I think it would be important, as you do some of this data dive, I think it's important that the community can see it as well.
Absolutely.
But thank you.
So we will move on to public comment. Aaron, is there anyone? Okay, I do have a comment that I was asked to read. And this was from a student, Molly Olson, who's a senior here at Minnetonka. Dear Hampton Wilbraham Regional School District School Committee, I was in attendance at the December school committee meeting, and as a student at Minnetonka, I would love the opportunity to share my opinions. In regards to school rank, I acknowledge that it can be important. However, the ranking system of U.S. News and World Reports seems to value superficial statistics rather than the well-being of students. As an AP student, I have learned how valuable these classes can be as students, gain both college credit and a deeper understanding of the subject. However, I have also learned that an AP class is not always the right fit. At the beginning of high school, I valued taking harder classes above all else. However, last year, due to scheduling issues, I was placed in Honors American Literature rather than AP Lang, and it was potentially one of the best things that could have ever happened to me. I was introduced to my favorite book in that class and became a better writer. Additionally, I was taking a class that covered material I had cared about more than the content of AP Lang, a class I would have been taking simply for the sake of it being an AP class. By taking this class, I also was able to have a less stressful semester where I had the time to hang out with my family and friends on the weekends, a large difference from the semester prior when I was taking 3 AP credit classes. I also was able to devote more of my time to the difficult Spanish class I was taking and was more successful in that class because of this. This taught me that forcing AP classes onto students is not the right solution. Not only will you be causing students to learn to prioritize the wrong things in their academic careers, but in some cases you will be setting them up to fail. If you really want to increase the amount of students taking AP classes, then subsidize the cost of AP tests in order to encourage financial equity within higher education. I urge you to prioritize students over status. Sincerely, Molly Olson. Okay. We will continue with the subcommittee updates. So we will begin with the curriculum subcommittee. Cheryl. Okay. Thank you. Finance and operations. Bill.
Yeah, so we met on Monday, and the meeting minutes, I'll direct Ron into the meeting minutes. So we had a fairly robust discussion. As you guys are probably well aware, we are facing a $3 million shortfall. And looking at the finance committee's sort of poker faces on it, you can see that we're not nearly in the range where they're comfortable, and we're at the point now where we're trying to whittle away at the budget. The problem is when you face a deficit this steep, there's no way that you can whittle down the budget without impacting instruction somewhere along the way. It's just too big of a number. So we will continue our work with finance to try to get the number down as much as we can. And we did have a discussion at the beginning of the meeting about the roundtable, and there were some suggestions that were made, and I'll bring it back to you guys, where they were hoping that this, particularly Mr. Ducey and Carol Fitzgerald was hoping that the second roundtable would be a smaller sort of working group where, you know, I think this meeting was good. I think the budget roundtable was sort of an excellent display for the public in understanding where our money goes and where that deficit came from. But there was more interest in creating sort of a working group for that second meeting and kind of paring down the list a little bit. And rather than having a room full of 25 people, try to get maybe like, you know, 6 or 8. I'm just throwing that number out there, but that was something that was thrown out. And so I bring it back to you guys because you know, this is ever evolving, ever changing. You know, I think what we want to do is we want to make the roundtables as productive as possible. You know, and we don't want to get in. And Patrick had made the point. You know, it's the third year in a row. You know, talk to the legislators about the exact same topics and what kinds of things can we do to make things better. I know that during the meeting, Maura had a suggestion that we work with the MASC and possibly create a couple of resolutions for the MASC, which makes sense. If the MASC is sort of our largest fulcrum that we have, at least working with other districts and creating resolutions that can be discussed, and real world resolutions talking about special education, circuit breaker reimbursement, and how much that impacts the budget from year to year. And so I think some good things came out of it. We still have work to go on the budget, but I think overall it's going to be a really hard budget year this year, and it's going to be way worse next year. Once those federal grants dry up, there's going to be a lot of space to backfill. So I don't know, Sean or Maura, if you guys have any other.
Yeah, I'd like to add, if you want to go first.
You already talked to me, so go ahead.
Okay. I had my hand up. So basically, Carol brought up a really good point. She said that meeting, the last budget roundtable, was more of a state of the schools meeting, and having our representatives and stuff in there, maybe that's something that we could do in the fall or early winter, and then the one that we would have now really is getting into the budget, like really deep diving, answering questions and letting the townspeople really understand where we're putting money, why we're putting money in certain places, and just that deep dive. I think that would just be helpful because more than half of Wilbraham's budget goes to, was it 61%? 62? And goes towards the school district. So, really, it's like 57? 57? Oh, okay. So Hampton's 61, Wilbraham's 57, something like that.
We also had a discussion about maybe changing the dates for that, which is something where you would have a state of the schools sort of before like, let's say, the Thanksgiving break. So we'll have our Sims Day to that. And we can kind of give an overview, just like we did, talk to legislators, and then do the working group in January, because our next meeting is March 2nd, and we have to have our budget done, approved by March 24th. So that basically leaves us, just 3 weeks to to have that working group get their work done. So if we did the working group in January for the state of the schools in the fall, that would definitely, I think that would help create a little bit more, give them a little bit more wiggle room as far as, timing to get that done.
I just wanted to touch base on the comment they made about the MASC involvement with resolutions. It was more specific along the lines of one of our biggest issues has been transportation, and for the last few years, Patrick has brought up a really great idea about considering having the legislature change the CPA use to include, recreation, to include sidewalks. And I think that we probably wouldn't be the only district that has that problem. And so I think we could use our voice here as a committee to, generate a resolution that we vote on and we send with Sean to the next meeting, so that maybe other schools would buy into it. And then that's to me, a great use of the legislature to say, Jay Calvary said, you got to come knocking on our door. You can't just expect us to say, hey, we're just giving you money. So let's try to use the MASC who has that, voting body. And then the other use of it too would be to potentially see if there were other resolutions that we could help for the funding aspect of, like the formula we talked about, changing how they calculate the formula, and maybe starting that where we could get other school committees to go via MASC, as well as the possibility of leveraging the LPVEC and having a meeting where we all get together somehow. We don't know how it would work, but if we have to speak as our portion of Western Mass to get funding, then how do we do that, and how do we orchestrate bringing everyone together to say that we're all having the same financial difficulties? I know that Aaron has mentioned a few times in our meetings about the listservs having the same concerns about increased costs, that they, how are they going to cover it? So.
Two things. So I was struck by the work that Aaron did comparing us to West Springfield, and Jake's comment regarding Chicopee and Xenia School that he referenced to say, well, they needed that funding. Yesterday's Boston Public Schools will increase their school budget this year, proposed by $65 million. They spend $28,800 per pupil, which is a 39% increase pre-pandemic. So if you look, we can talk about sidewalks all day long, but it's nickels and quarters. That's what we really need to attack. So we're hearing that these districts desperately need that money. And we look at 28 feet, and if I'm not mistaken, that's roughly $12,000 more per student than we spend on a student here, and we're being told, sorry, we can't give you any money. If we're going to do a resolution, and there'd be some irony with me supporting a resolution, but I would say that's what needs to focus on, that we're actually looking at something that truly can make a monumental difference in a budget. And that's ludicrous that we're being told these districts need that money more than us, and they're spending $12,000 more per student than we are. And that's just Boston. So that was the first part. Second part, John, you said earlier, right, every $130,000 when you're looking at the budget, we're looking at helps. I would ask the committee's thoughts, and I was thinking, Bill, on what you said with the strategic, or excuse me, not the strategic plan, but looking at really our built environment. People in buildings, right, those are the most expensive things, always. We have a building right now that, to your point here, is under its planned operating capacity. We have another building that is significantly under its planned operating capacity that we, in theory, could ask the district to look at closing for next year, which would have an immediate budget relief and would also not put us in a position where we have a risk of it being dormant for more than 5 years. So it's not going to trigger the need for code updates if, as the strategic plan works its way through and it's decided that that building has a use for the district moving forward, we haven't handcuffed ourselves at all, right? We can still use that building. So I would really encourage us as a committee to ask the administration to look at what it would take to potentially close Norton Burgess officially for house the program that is there now in another building that is under its planned operating capacity today. And that's potentially, I don't know, if it's $130,000, I don't know what it is, but the message I heard from you is every single dollar helps, and I think we really need to take that into consideration. That can be done today, while looking at the built environment in the future, because that has to occur. We can't keep again down the road to your point the other night.
So, yeah, I mean, we've been talking about this for a couple of years. And there's no question about it. I mean, if we look at our budget, unless you want to start really carving into education, the area in which we show the most amount of financial leakage is in our building utilization. There's no question about it. Last year, if you remember, our budget was reduced by the Finance Committee for $120,000, which was the direct result of the Finance Committee concluding that the operation of Thornton Burgess was costing the district $120,000. And so they basically reduced our overall budget by $120,000. And I can tell you, their eyes are fixated on this again, all right, and not just Thornton Burgess. They're looking at our building utilization, and I think it's fair for the taxpayers in these two communities to understand that we need to optimize what it is that we're doing. If we have the opportunity to close a building, then I think that it's something that we need to seriously consider. Obviously, education is the main goal, but at the same time, I would counter to say that education is largely dependent on funding. If we have inadequate funding, then education will suffer. So we need to find a happy medium between the two, and it's going to take a lot of different discussions happening simultaneously. One of the things you have to look at is the regional agreement. You have to look at building utilization. We have to look at the new data that NESDAQ gave us, all right, looking out to our projections out until 2032, okay? There's a lot of things that we need to consider in moving forward on this, but we have to do something. The great irony is that the original 5-year plan was set in 2017, which means that this would have been the year that, if that 5-year plan had gone through, that you would have had 7 through 12 in this building. It's 5 years later, we're facing the exact same problem. And now the only difference is 5 years ago, we were facing a budget deficit of around $1 million, and now we're 3 times that. So we're hemorrhaging cash in terms of building utilization. I think it's crucial for us to really drill down on this. We require a couple of ad hoc subcommittees looking at different parts of this in order to get it done efficiently. Strategic plan committee is one group. There's only 4 members. There's only so much that they're going to be able to do. So, however the committee wants to move forward on it, but I'm going to say that, you know, it's a problem that we've known has been in existence for 5 years. So we really need to move on this.
Is the committee okay with asking the administration to look into the closure or purchase for next school year as a preparing budget issue?
I have no issue with that. I would just say that if that's the will of the committee, we should just make sure that both communities are communicated to publicly that that's what we're looking to do. And just to make sure, because if that includes either giving the building back or the district maintaining the building, just making sure that's clear.
Under our current lease agreement, we would maintain the building.
I understand. I just want to make sure that because gets out, I just want to make sure that we're respectful in making sure that the select boards of both communities, as well as the finance committees, are aware of that.
Can I just amend that motion to what's that? Amend the motion? Okay. So I was just thinking more along the lines of, like, you know, I'm looking at the 3 people who are probably the most instrumental in providing us the information. I don't know about educational programming. You all know about that. That's why you're here. So I would probably say, rather than sort of like, you know, buttonholing and saying, well, we're just going to look at the closure of one building, can we sit down and look at, like, what we can do district-wide, sort of removing the parameters of the regional agreement, like what education, what is the best thing for our district, and what is the best way that we can move forward, not only education, but also financially.
Actually, we have a committee that is supposed to be doing this.
I have a great subcommittee report.
Yeah.
And we'll tell you a lot of different things.
We'll be
to talk about.
talking, yeah, we have been talking about this, and I believe we're specifically meeting, what is it, Tuesday?
Yeah.
And we're specifically talking about school configuration. So I don't know, do you want to take it from here, John?
Yeah, we'll finish this, but it's done.
So the reason I had just said that is I'm not sure if the school reconfiguration could occur in time for next year. And so if we're looking at the budget, and a budget that will have to be presented in, what, 2 months, a month and a half, 2 months, that is probably the one that you may be able to take action on and see an impact next budget. I would agree with your assessment, and that there is a committee that's doing that work, and I think that's critical work. But maybe there's more burning platforms to look at one right now.
And use it as a bridge.
And that was one of I think one of the largest items that came out of the strategic planning committee, like when we were having the discussion to create the new strategic plan, was at least looking at that. Like everybody agreed that it was time to start to look at that, to figure out the proper usage. I think if you're going to go back into changing the regional agreement, though, you have to have a plan so people understand what that looks. It's better to have a visual than just people saying what's going to happen. You know what I mean? Like,
And I agree with that. There's not enough time.
oh, yeah, no, but I think
There's
it's...
not enough time to formulate a plan. There's certainly not enough time to educate the public about the
Exactly.
utility and the value of it. However, I think that would be sort of a bridging step. But I would be cautious only in the standpoint that I don't want to necessarily, like, you want to make sure that you're constantly moving forward. I don't necessarily want to do all this work and move sideways. So, I would still encourage us to sort of, brainstorm and figure out, like, where TWB fits into the overall model of this, and, try to get a handle on education of like what we think the best is. I mean, I was looking at the numbers from NASDAQ, and if their projections, I was a little confused on some of their projections.
It's actually going down and going back up, but those must be COVID babies.
But then they were adding numbers per grade. They're adding like 20 students per grade. It was a little different than the report that they had given us, 8 years ago, 7 years ago. But at the same time, if we're using those numbers as a projection, all of a sudden when you get out to 2032, having 6 classes in this building now becomes tight. And then the decision becomes, okay, so do we try to reconfigure the students in the buildings, or do we consider adding an annex onto this building and allowing expansion in this building? So all things to be talked about, but I think that John and Aaron and Lisa really need to be like front and center on all of this, because you guys have more knowledge about education than all of us put together. So I would really say that, we need to look at the educational model, see the value in each, but also look at building utilization to figure out what it is that we want to do. I would say that the restrictions of the regional agreement, I would factor those in, but I would look first at what you think the most optimal educational configuration would be, based on not just finances, but certainly the well-being of the students, and also taking into account the projected sort of leveling and slight rise in the district. Because even going up, they were putting us at, like, I think it was 3069, which is not considerably higher. You're talking 100 more students. But, when you add those in through 7 through 12, half the students, 50 students, can make a difference.
Yeah, my update's not as interesting. Okay.
Sorry. Is that the will of the committee to ask? I don't think that has been solidified.
Yes.
I just wanted to.
All those in favor?
I would probably say we're just.
I would say we're asking John to present on Tuesday what he's looking at for configuration of the buildings. And I understand that we could say next year's a skip, but I would like to hear John's plan and see what the other people for Wilbraham and Hamden think about it. Could we hold it off for a meeting before we do it? Is it okay to wait 2 weeks?
We're just talking about Thornton Burgess, right?
Yeah,
Okay,
just moving the programs that are there so that that building gets.
if it's feasible.
Yes.
Can we move it till after we have this
We
meeting?
can work numbers to show what the program, how that would look like.
Okay.
for our budget.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. All right, Lisa.
Okay, so my LPVEC meeting was back in January, and then we had the budget roundtable, so things might have changed when John gets to do his report, but this is my report. There's going to be a CTEC open house February 7th from 5 to 7 p.m. And they're highlighting advanced manufacturing technology, automotive technology, carpentry, cosmetology, culinary arts, early education and care, building, property maintenance and management, graphics and visual design, health assisting, information support services and networking and landscaping. At the time of the meeting, there were 2 finalists for the DEI coordinator, but I would assume there might be some changes since then. There was an electric bus update. Besides the 10 million grant that they had received, they just were awarded another 2 million grant to add on to the buses. Each district will be getting at least 1 bus or more. So it does depend on routes and things of that nature and where charging stations will be. So they don't have that information yet. And they started an advertising campaign to get more bus drivers. They did started a print campaign in newspapers, radio campaign with local stations, and have some billboards up around the area. And that's it.
On that CTEC open house, anybody that has an 8th grade child today received an email that the LPDC representatives and the HWRT representatives spoke to the 8th grade students, made them aware of the open house, and made them aware of the program. So just FYI after.
Just a point of order, would she need to submit the minutes from her meeting to this committee?
No.
I was just wondering.
They have meetings, they have minutes, some of these minutes for the meeting, yeah. But it's not a our subcommittee. It's just our representative.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay. All right, I just
Yeah.
want to be clear.
Thank you.
You need to go back to get all the appropriation minutes.
I have nothing to report on the corporation, nothing to report on negotiations. More so policy subcommittee.
So we met last night for a very brief meeting. And what you should have in your folder today is the memo to review for the first reading, 2 policies that just had some slight changes to them. Sorry, I had it open initially. Policy IJLA for library resources and policy JRD for student photographs. There was just some language updates to IJLA for the library resources, where wording was changed to read as reasons for withdrawing an item may include but are not limited to, as well as just adding the cross-reference of the instructional materials policy, IJ. And then for the library resources policy, for the student photographs policy, I apologize, I don't have that noted up here, but I know it was just some
We added the word
aforementioned. So it was just, because there's wording changes, we have to run them by that committee. So tonight is just the first reading, the next meeting we have will be the second. And then from tonight's meeting, I will take forward the BDE policy to be reviewed as well. We have been asked to take a look at, by John, to take a look at the graduation requirements policy that we have And we had a student appear at our meeting, but because they weren't on the agenda, couldn't speak, that there's been an ask to look at the attendance policy, the policy for attendance or dismissals. So you'll see that come forward in a future meeting. And then KCD, which was one of the corporate gifts ones. There was some language change in September by the MASC. I haven't had a chance to fully review with the committee if that changes from the policy we have now, but just a couple of word updates from MASC. So you'll see those come forward as well.
And that graduation change is to support vocational pursuits. So that's why we're looking at it.
We hadn't looked at it, so it was briefly touched on just at the meeting for what the future agenda for, our future ask for our future agenda. So our next meeting is February 13th at 4 o'clock p.m. in the district office. I think it's at 4. Yes.
It was 4:30,
I know, but because we were adding this meeting, we were changing the time, but it'll be on the public notice.
Just a quick one. So a student reached out to me who is over 18 years old, and the issue was what kind of rights does a student who is over 18 years old and therefore an adult in the eyes of the law, there were some issues, and she wanted to speak to that. And I know Mara did talk to her, and it was funny. I was surprised that we didn't have a policy when a student's 18 years old. It's so good progress on getting something like that
So,
going.
and even, I did bring it up with John because, our protocol normally, that we didn't follow that. So our protocol is if a student comes to us, we encourage them to go to their guidance counselor, go to their principal, and then if the principal doesn't work for that, you can go to the superintendent, assistant superintendent. And I know talking with Sean, you said you've done that, so thank you for that. I did bring, after my conversation with the student, I did bring it to John because I felt it was important to know that I had communication with the student. And he had said that he had conversation at the high school level for that because it obviously is an impact to high school students.
Oh, yeah?
I'm not sure if we have to have a policy on it so much as it's a procedural item for the high school. So we'll just get clarification on that for the next meeting. And I did communicate with the student that we would reach back out.
Oh, great. So it might not even have to be a policy change. This might be something
that they do at the school level.
Oh, great. Thank you, Mom.
No problem, thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so the planning committee update. So we met on January 24th. The role of the planning committee is to look at long-term issues facing the district. The group is asked to look at the following items and make recommendations to build bridges to the representative bodies and communities that we represent. This may include coming up with better ways of doing things or confirming that we've optimized the way that we do things. So our priorities are building utilization, and this includes looking at quantitative data surrounding enrollment, building capacity, space constraints, flexible reconfiguration, which would also include building tours. And things may get added as we look at some of this information, but those are the things that we're focusing on right now, and that is going to be our primary focus at our next meeting. We will also be looking at the regional agreement and assessments. So that would include the potential to cross town lines, and this would also include surveying community members and eventually create a schedule for an annual review of the regional agreement. We also discussed community relations, identify ways to bring the towns together and communicating to the broad community. So that's non-school community members. So this, for example, this would be utilization of print media, using the Hampton Wilbraham Times, the Reminder, for important announcements, the townwide robocalls, and then utilizing the local news media. And then the superintendent has offered to have a superintendent's corner in the local newspaper, which he's very excited about. The planning committee is able to make interim recommendations throughout this process, and we will work to be as thorough and efficient as possible, and not take the full 5 years that the strategic plan allows for. Our next meeting is Tuesday, February 7th at 6:30 in the district conference room.
And I thought that was to reiterate, that on that if we agree with something, then we bring it back to the committee right away, rather than you know, not just one big report, like, so there'll be a lot more, hopefully back and forth once it comes to an agreement, you know, once we've reached out to the townspeople and get as much of a consensus as we can generate for voting here.
I would say, I know you have representatives for select board from each town.
Mhm.
Sorry. Oh, sorry. I know you have representatives from select board on both towns. I probably would create a pipeline of information for finance and advisory for both towns as well.
Correct.
To make sure that they're in the loop on what's going on. And obviously we'll be using our facilities people to provide us with a lot of the supporting information.
Yes, but for right now, yes, we will include all those members and bringing people in as needed. For right now, the committee is the 4 members.
Just don't want to fill out a loop.
No, this is something that one of the things was making sure that we're very transparent with our communication, making sure that everybody's aware, which is making sure that we not only are communicating at our subcommittee level, but also with the school committee, but also the broad community, and all parties involved in making sure that, you know, the people that have the information that we need, you know, with the buildings, that we get everything that we need and have the conversations and the input necessary.
You mentioned the negotiations.
I said nothing to report.
Okay, sorry.
Motion approved January 5th, January 19th minutes.
Second.
I have just one on the January 5th, just, so.
Actually, are you doing the consent agenda or are you doing the reports?
Well, because there's a vote on C and a vote on B, I just do the minutes.
Oh, okay.
Just on the note of under the executive session, there was, it says Bert Chairwoman Blucher, recording secretary is not present during the executive session. I do not believe I stated that during the meeting, so we just have to make sure that if it wasn't stated at the meeting, that it's not added in. Thank you. Oh, yes. Oh, sorry, we need to approve with that change. Sorry. I just read it as well. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone
Aye.
opposed? Warrants. Okay, so the student council picked up.
That was just part of the consent agenda.
Okay,
So
sorry.
this is a field trip that's happened in the past, so just a
Motion approved student council field trip to Hyannis.
Second.
Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries.
Motion approved donation to Green Meadows Drama Club in honor of John M. Flynn.
Second.
I have a question on that because what was in our folder had a non-disclosed amount,
I was curious on that as well.
so I wasn't sure how we can approve something if we don't have an amount of what it is.
If it's over $500, I think that's the threshold, so it's,
Do you know that it's over $500?
if it comes to us, it has to be over $500.
Okay.
And they're getting nods from Aaron and from John.
I was just curious, why is it not this close?
The donor wanted to keep it private.
Okay.
And they didn't make us sign any agreement.
No agreement.
We have to handle it for the approval. With removal and.
State laws in
Yeah.
Delaware.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. So we will go on to the superintendent update.
Okay, so let me begin by lowering expectations and maybe saying we have to go to the tape because if anyone's interested, I'm not planning on bringing a master plan next Tuesday. I have started to gather some information about the listed occupancies of schools and what they can actually hold in a practical matter because the listed occupancy is basically based on if you had the building maxed out. If you had the building full of students and had an assembly going on and had members of the public. So it's meant for like all hands on deck, but your actual educational spaces are a subset of that. So what I will be doing on Tuesday is providing some information about what our listed capacities for all the schools are and for one of the schools where I've been able to actually go around and go through each of the rooms and get some realistic numbers, and I'll be doing that with all of them. Sorry it's not going faster, but member Ryan and I are on our third meeting this week.
High five.
So there's a lot, and there's a lot of other stuff which you will see too as I give my report.
Excuse me, John, with that being said, do we want to make that motion to close TWB, to instruct them to close TWB next year, or are we happy with how it was?
No, it wasn't a motion, it was just to look into it.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay, to continue?
Thank you, yeah.
Okay. So next I'll thank Green Meadows for sharing the invaluable insights from the recent family reunification bill. I spoke about that a lot at my last report. Their work and preparation paid off just days later when we had to actually implement a family reunification operation after the WMS evacuation. But their support went beyond sharing insights. For those of you who don't know, they also sent some of the staff who had helped set up their drill to help with the family reunification that took place here at the high school. So I just wanted to thank them and let them know how appreciative of the teamwork I was on that. Also, with respect to my entry plan, I want to let you know that that is wrapping up. I'm looking forward to presenting my entry findings at the next school committee meeting. So I'll be able to share some reflections on what the first months have been like. The website review and evaluation team continues its work to improve our district website. The team had a meeting with a local firm named Wild Apples 2 weeks ago. We also have a meeting scheduled with another local firm, Rediker, to review their website solution. We hope to make a final determination concerning the product and process that best meets our needs for communication in the future so that we can prepare for a migration to whatever comes next in the next fiscal year. And then following up on a report you heard earlier, happy to announce that the search for a new EID coordinator has come to a close. And I'm thrilled to announce that Vanetta Lightfoot, who has served since 2016 as the Multicultural Affairs Operations Manager for STCC, has accepted the position. Appreciate working with the other LVPE superintendents and Executive Director Joyle to make this selection, and I look forward to working with Vanetta to improve our district. In other personnel matters, I can also report that the district has hired Dr. Karolina Kapczynski as the middle school Spanish teacher for Green Meadows. The absence of Spanish instruction at Green Meadows was brought to my attention even before I was hired, so I'm happy that we're finally able to provide the students of Hampton with this learning opportunity. 2 meetings with Mass Insight are set to kick off the audit process. These meetings will take place tomorrow and Monday. The focus of these meetings will be to forge a partnership between Mass Insight and staff from HWRSD to align on the equity audit timeline and outcomes, familiarize ourselves with the Mass Insight District Equity Audit Framework, and review the stakeholder engagement process, establish clear communication channels, and ensure thorough data collection for a complete picture of the district. And knowing that vocational opportunities and expanding them is an important goal in the strategic plan and an important goal for many of our community members, we've been examining our practices specifically around educating and informing families about the vocational and technical educational opportunities available through CTEC. As you heard earlier tonight, we are doing a very consistent and thoughtful outreach to 8th grade parents, which is a change of practice from the past. To that end, invited CTEC staff to meet with current 8th graders and their families, and we'll be asking the committee to approve some minor adjustments to our graduation requirements. As you may recall from the December meeting, Principal Hale was talking about the disadvantage our students are at by not being allowed to go to CTEC as 9th graders. Part of that is based on graduation requirements, but working with high school staff, we feel that there's a way to modify that so that we could send students in 9th grade. I think it would dramatically expand vocational opportunities for our students, and I think it would still enable them to be held to a very rigorous standard. Next, the middle school has restructured the learning time deficiencies that I reported on, both at middle school and Green Meadows. Working together with school staff, Administrators were able to find a solution that satisfies them and satisfies the law. Essentially, it's about reducing passing times and increasing time on learning. So I'd like to thank everyone for their ideas and the flexibility they brought into their search for a solution. Finally, I've included in your packet enrollment for February, which stands at 2,880, as well as NASDAQ enrollment projections for the next 10 years. Projections, of course, are not an exact science, but they do give us a sense of what might be likely, which is a modest decrease in high school enrollment and a modest increase in student enrollment in grades K to 8. And that is my report.
Jack, can I just ask one question?
Sure. My
middle child is, Angelina is in 8th grade. So I was actually home that day when the call went out. And so when we look at how things were set up, and I know John was facing, just a very unsettling situation in trying to move those kids. With respect to each one of the schools, I would say that evacuation plans, we really need to look at how exactly the evacuation plan is going to work at the practical level. Stony Hill was basically backed up in both directions. And I think about that not only in terms of, people waiting in their cars, but also, through traffic, people trying to get through, emergency vehicles, et cetera. So I would really implore the administration to work with each of the schools to look at their unique situation. The high school is in a much different position. There's different areas of ingress and egress. Whereas when I look at Stony Hill or I look at Wilbraham Middle School, there is one access road going in, which really limits the ability to have cars come in and out. So, I know that I was in traffic for probably 45 minutes, and other people in traffic longer than I was. But it's, I think it's crucial. I mean, this is a water main break. What if it was an active shooter situation? The tensions and the emotions run much higher. So I would want to make sure that we have as an efficient process as possible to move the students to a safe location and then allow unification to occur there. Like I said, I didn't even see it. I had a friend who was farther up in the line than I was, and I know that the Wilbraham police weren't there until about 30 minutes after the call went out. And by then, the traffic had backed up in both directions. Pretty much Stony Hill was down to Glen Road, and I don't know how far it was going south, but I would implore us to take a hard look at that to make sure that going forward that we have a usable plan because it was a long wait.
Does your plan include the local law enforcement and the timing? Because if he's saying that it took them 30 minutes to get there, that's a whole other problem. But I'm just curious if, I can imagine if it was like an active shooter situation that the police would respond fairly quickly.
Yep, our plan does include first responders, and we do an after-action review after each event. One of the things that we thought about after this particular event was, would it have been better to relocate to the high school and then do the family reunification there? And which was actually, one of the things that went out to families in my message that night was, if we have a future situation where we're able to do that, we may want to move the traffic to a different spot. So certainly is part of our thinking about what it might be like next time, but I'll also say just a couple of things. One is that anytime we have to do family reunification, it's going to be a long process. It's not like dismissing from the school at the end of a regular day. It takes hours. And
you have to make sure that every child goes.
Right.
Yeah, it's perfect. Yeah, it's perfectly understandable. And I do agree with the idea that, I think if evacuation of the building is of urgency, then we should really be looking at evacuating students from the premises and then do a reunification somewhere else. Because like I said, this is a water main break. But if it turned out to be a fire where there was potentially dangerous situations, now you have kids standing outside. So I truly believe that the evacuation plan should be, get the kids out of the building, have them accounted for, moving to a safe space, and then allow reunification to occur there. That way, you're covering all the bases. So if it's just a water leak, it's just a water leak. But if it's a fire, an active shooter situation, then if it's the same plan, it's the same plan. You don't have to worry about altering it.
Well, I'll say that it may not be, you may not be able to do that. Every situation is unique. There may be some situations where we're not able to move students from the school. It may be that the threat is in the community, or it may be that for other reasons reunification can only be done on site. So that is a possibility as well. But thinking through this one, if we're in a situation where we can safely move students to another building first, I think that might be a better way to go in the future.
It was a good training exercise. And the only way you're going to know it is to actually have it happen.
Right.
So,
That water break was wow when I saw the video of that.
I just want to add one more thing. Having tried to get some things done traffic-wise at Stony Hill Road is a state highway, and so nothing can be changed without state approval, and it's a long process.
Okay, so
Sorry. The enrollment report. Are those numbers right for Green Meadows? I mean, if we've talked about declining enrollment at Green Meadows. Take a look at, that's like a 3% increase just in January. They picked up 9 students. And it's across the board. It's 3 grades, didn't pick up any. So it's not like that's a pre-K increase that we sometimes see.
So all I can say is I don't actually go check with principals to make sure that the numbers are right. I believe the numbers are right. I have heard principals talking about move-ins throughout the course of the year.
Well, that's what I was curious. I mean, that's awesome, right? So when we talk about it, how long have we had the conversation of declining enrollment, specifically in Hampton, declining enrollment? I mean, that's a big jump. And then if we look at it, just compare it back to 2020, let's say, and of the K through 5, every grade but 1 has an increase from 2020. And if we look just to write 2020 as the compare, we're 4 students short of where we were in 2019 and 2020. With a, and it's all, I mean, if you were to look at it, you could say it's all of the pre-K. And then 6, 7, 8 potentially. So 6, right? You look at that difference. It was 19 in grade 6. It's 4 now. So that tells you that the K through 5, we're seeing the jump. This is a good thing. As many times as we've sat there and said, what can we do? It's naturally occurring.
If there's a lot less for sale signs, as soon as they go up, I will tell you they quickly are down. Or homes that are going for sale for keep between Wilbraham and Hampton right now.
That's really nice to see.
So, future agenda items, we have Booster Club, Board Revalue, Director of Health Service Update, Grant Writer, Middle School Program of Studies, also the High School Program of Studies, we will also be talking about the next meeting, the LPBEC Collaborative, and parameters of stabilization fund, Metco update, roundtable number 2, also discussing, I guess, possibly numbers reflecting the closure of TWB. Oh, and then, yeah, anything else anyone would like to add?
Maybe this is a quick answer, but do you remember at that round table, what was it, Angela people said that the Booster Club had secured like $350,000 to pay off the rest of the turf. I thought, wasn't the turf supposed to be funded by?
I don't think it was to pay off the rest of it. It was dedicated towards.
Or towards, towards that. I thought that was the thing that was the selling point before that would be raised. Have they done any fundraisers or something? Can we, I don't know, help them with that, like promote whatever fundraising that they're doing, or at least let them come and speak to it?
That's why it's on there.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah.
Good. All right.
Yeah.
together on the April meeting for the,
Curriculum subcommittee.
yes, the subcommittee. Anyway, that meeting will look at, Steve Hale will be there to look at the enrollment for, what is it?
For program studies.
The enrollment for program studies. See, there's going to be a change in it. So I just wanted everyone to know that that was coming up. So we will be presenting that on this agenda.
Anything else?
For our next meeting, the acoustics are a considerable challenge at Mile Tree from past meetings. Can we work to make sure that we can do whatever in advance to make sure that everybody can hear each other?
Is that the one
I
where we
haven't
sat across
experienced
from
that
each
yet,
other?
but
Yes,
that's
yes.
what
Boys versus
Yes.
girls.
It's
It was like a dance,
That's all the things.
school dance.
You name it, it's everything.
Okay.
So the layout and configuration plays a big role. The Sharks versus the Jets is boys
Yeah.
versus girls, as we said the last time that one didn't work.
Waiting for somebody to ask you to dance at the school dance.
But then we could also, in theory, do it in the library. I mean, the library is, when we used to do PTO meetings, we had more people that would come to a school committee meeting in the library there. So maybe just an idea.
Judging by the amount of audience we have at the meetings lately, I mean, we could, downscale a little bit, plan to have a couple of extra seats depending on who's coming to visit.
With that, our next meeting is Thursday, February 16th at 6:30 at Mile Tree School. We are invited at 6 o'clock for a Mile Tree presentation.
Motion adjourned.
Second. Thank you. Roll call vote. Bill?
Aye.
Cheryl? John?
Aye.
Aye.
Lisa? Aye. Maura?
Aye.
Myself, aye. 8:33. We're adjourned.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank
Can
you,
we
and George.
please check, Warren?
Yeah.
Sign the